things. So I'll give you a nice introduction here and all that. Just talking off the air to my next guest. I'm Marky Billson. This is Tri-City Sports Now. He was talking about, find out that the people that you admire are, when you meet them, and they're as genuine as they seemed in public life. One guy who I think has always been genuine, at least when I have spoken with them, is Bill Curry, the former college football coach, and also someone who played in 3 of the first 5 Super Bowls. I sometimes see those old highlight films with you and the Colts and wearing that 50 running down the field on the kickoffs and things of that nature from Super Bowl 3 and was the thing that made the interview come to life. But you credit John Robert Bell, when he was an assistant coach under Bobby Dodd at Georgia Tech, in making you a pro football player when you had been a 4th stringer at Georgia Tech. To reiterate the story, can you tell us a little bit about the legendary local?
As for Coach Bell, I was one of those guys. I was a tweener. I was Mayo at Georgia Tech, playing for the great Bobby Dodd, who was a Tennessee legend. He was great with us, but by my 4th year, I was yet to get on the field. And so in frustration, I went to one of the assistant coaches, and I said, "Coach, maybe I'm not trying hard enough." He said, "No, you try very hard." I said, "Well, maybe I don't put my plays or something." He said, "No, you know your plays well." I said, "Well, then why am I not playing?" He said, "Because you're not good enough, and you'll never be good enough. And so get your education, help us recruit." And he wasn't a bad guy. He just was doing his job. And he mentioned that he didn't think I moved my feet well enough, and that was not something that could be corrected. Well, within 2 days, assistant coach came to my locker, looked me in the eye, and he said, "Bill, I would like to sit down at the practice field early. How about me going to the practice field early? Let's work on your footwork, because I know you can play." Wow. Found me a summer job where I actually human beings I've ever known, and it was just a privilege to work with him. And he changed a whole lot of lives. Mine was one of them.
I know that had to be a reason why. I used to hear when football was on hiatus at ETSU, and there was an athletic trainer named Jerry Robertson who the impact that he once had in his community, where his endorsement could become eventually the mayor, or just as you say, the kindness and all this, just the outgoing way that he would have with everyone, and was so approachable. It meant a lot to me, and here I was just when he died, and there was a standard article. They didn't. What it bothered me is that you were at his funeral, and I know you spoke at his funeral. That never made the Johnson City Press. I was wondering if you could tell my audience what it was that you said at Bell's funeral, if that comes to mind, Bill Curry.
Oh, I'll never forget it. First of all, I was just crushed when we lost him, and the people. And he became like a member of my. He felt like a family member. I always called him Coach, and, but it felt like he was a whole lot more. And to be called by his family and asked to come, I get emotional. players, and at field in Atlanta, it's about 100 degrees, and I was playing both ways, and everybody else was playing one way. I mean, they had offensive guys and defensive guys coming and going, but I was out there every play. So when we came to a break, I came over here, and I remember I had tears in my eyes, and I was feeling so sorry for myself. I said, Coach, everybody else is playing offense or defense, and I'm having to play both ways. You're making me stand out there. I mean, did you mean to do that? I mean, surely you're nicer than that. He didn't smile. About 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. We had several injuries, and I had to play the. He not only was he caring and tough, but he knew what he was doing.
No, it's a great point. I just talked to a high school coach before, Gary Rankin, who's very successful in Tennessee. And he says, yeah, I got to do the off-season thing with us, just like John Robert Bell did with you, because we're going to play 15 games. We got to condition ourselves to not a 10-game schedule, but a 15-game schedule if we want to be where we want to and all that. Georgia playing Kentucky, and I guess you coached at Kentucky for many years. Did you ever think you'd live to see the day that Kentucky would play Tennessee and Kentucky would be 3 games ahead of Tennessee with a 7-2 record instead of a 4-5 record?
Successful against Tennessee. At Georgia Tech, we had mixed results. We could win from time to time, and we played them very close. I didn't think in terms of Eastern Division of the SEC to be so competitive is a good thing. I really thought that the Wildcats would give Georgia a run for their money last week, and that didn't work out. So I'm sure they'll rally. This is a gutty Kentucky team. I'm sure they'll be ready to play, and obviously Pruitt's got his guys improving.
Well, let me ask you, you obviously came from Kentucky from an Alliant thing, I guess, but just when you went to Kentucky and you had been at Alabama, I've got to feel that you probably went there and said, boy, there's going to be a lot to change here. What does Alabama as a football
Exception of Notre Dame, and maybe one of the others on a sporadic basis like Southern California or Michigan for years on end is this. Every single guy that runs on the field, they become the perennial champs that they are becoming now. So that's a big advantage that Alabama enjoys. And
it's ingrained into the program. Was there anything else at Kentucky?
We got a lot of cooperation from the athletic department. If the basketball coach is on your side in Kentucky, that means a lot. And Patino was just great coaches, but he was a Kentucky football. He did everything he could. That you can prosper, and I think that the guys up there now are doing a good job.
It's interesting you say about the basketball coach helping out, because you may remember this. I'm from the people at Moon Township, and the stories he saw. John Calipari is from football court. He'd go through the window and unlock the door so he could play late at night. Something, a story like that. But if you're doing that from back in the day with somebody who would go on to become the football coach at the and then you would be helpful to the contemporary football coach. That makes for you at Tim Couch. Listen to me, Tim Couch, to play for the Wildcats, because he was heavily recruited by a lot of people. What was the convincing factor for you to get him to stay at home?
Well, I don't think it was me that got him to stay at home. I think it was Kentucky. Tim, much. When he just made up his mind where he was going, he announced it, and that was the end of it. But and of course, we had recruited him with every legal means that we could ever since we had seen him throw a football. And of course, he ended up being a great player. But I think he was probably. We signed a great kicker named Philip Doyle in Alabama. He said, when I was about 10 years old. I think Tim Couch made up his mind when he was 10 years old he was going to play for the Wildcats. That's just my opinion.
Okay, but one of the things I know from back then, and I know you were criticized for it, but I think in hindsight, I'll have to start Billy Jack Haskins, his senior year. Play the senior. I gave a commitment to Haskins, and I've got to make do on it. Was that the motivation at the time?
No, I made a commitment to the team, like I make every year, everywhere I've understanding that. When Tim became the best quarterback, he got to play. That's how life works. If you're in a fair system.
As I recall, actually, and I don't have the stats right in front of me, but I do remember Couch having some freshman struggles. Of course, by the time his junior year came around, the number one pick in the NFL draft. Not the first quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, because he didn't start. Somewhat the first notable quarterback of the renewed Cleveland Browns. We'll at least say that. Anyway, we've been talking to Bill Curry, as Tennessee is going to play Kentucky, and so he was a little bit of an insight on just the turnaround at Kentucky. As the Wildcats are now the favorite to win their first game at Neyland Stadium in 1984. But before I leave you, I remember this is a list of coaches that you have played for. The aforementioned Bobby Dodd, Vince Lombardi, Don Shula, Chuck Knox, Chuck Knoll, Don McCafferty, Colts Super Bowl V. And I remember when I asked you, had you ever played for John Robert Bell, not knowing, you said he was the best of the area, or didn't know him. They might be very skeptical considering the accomplishments of those other coaches. But if you knew John Robert Bell, you'd say, you know what? Yeah, he does hang with those other guys. Undefeated at ETSU. He's the only guy that's ever done that, and that goes and says something as well. Anyway, Bill Curry, always a pleasure, always genuine. We'll see how the Tennessee-Kentucky game. Listening to Bill Curry on Tri-City Sports. Now, I'm going to break down the ETSU basketball game tonight with Hiawassee, and also tell you what games you're going to see now. There you go. Well, thank you.